We're back again, Mr. Lee Addison on the Rugby League Coach podcast. Lots to discuss, mate. Lots to go through. I was at the Origin last night. I'm a New South Wales Blue. We lost. There's been some new coaching appointments in the merry-go-round of the NRL as well. And there's many topics. But before we go too far, how are you?
I'm all right, lad. I felt a bit ropey this morning. A few things going on this weekend. A few people. I thought I'd best give myself a Rona test. So I did one. I did one of those rap things.
Yeah.
And there it is. There's all the things that I finished. It's negative. It's fine. So I don't know if anybody can see on the thing that only one thing. So all good. It's not like me to do that, but I guess I'm around that many people. I'll just take the precaution because I don't want to be infecting anyone who's
of course.
And mate, I put the swab up my nose and my eyes started crying and I'm sneezing. My cat ran out of the room. It's crazy. Have you ever had one?
Yeah, I've had one. Oh, they're terrible. The home tests are okay because you control it, but when you go and do the proper PCR test and you're in the drive-through or something like that, they're so rough too because they do, thousands a day, especially at the peak of COVID. They were doing thousands a day, and they just shove it up there.
I know. Yeah, they're not gentle, are they?
No, it's just like when you're at school and you get your vaccinations, they do the needles. Yeah. Those nurses are always just rough as because they do so many needles a day and they just get
on up 110th.
Yeah,
hey, I need a bit of feedback out on my eyes, right? So, am I looking at you now?
Yeah.
Am I looking at you now?
No.
Right. So I need to tell anybody who's watching this, because people listen and watch, that I don't know why that's happening. So I'm not being rude. I am trying to talk to you.
Well, I look at you and the camera's not too far.
I don't blame you.
The camera's not too far, so I'm hope it doesn't look weird when I talk.
I wonder if I can play around with this so it changes around a bit, I might be able to
have a play during the week. See how you go.
Does it look like I'm looking at you now?
Yeah, you look.
What about now?
No, I feel like there we go. I feel like we're face to face.
There you go.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I feel like we're face to face. It's as close as you can get.
I bet everybody listening to this podcast going, "What the hell are them two going on about?"
Yeah, Rugby League Coach podcast, and they're talking about camera angles
and COVID.
Oh well, mate. COVID didn't disrupt the Maroons camp, did it? Tom did, and what a great debut.
Mate, I saw him coming through as a schoolboy, and people who listen to me or watch me on social media or members of my website or whatever will know I'm not the most easily impressed guy by people. I'm one of those you have to earn my sort of praise, and I don't, not in a nasty way. I don't think if people give out praise willy-nilly, then it doesn't have much value. So I've always been a massive fan of Tom Dearden. I thought he was one of the best schoolboys I saw coming through. Saw him playing for Wynnum at the various levels, playing in the I don't know the sponsor, call it the Q Cup. Playing in the Q Cup, he really stood out to me. I thought this kid is. And I guess I was very surprised when Brisbane got rid of him. I don't know if you remember, but Brisbane stockpiled a load of halfbacks. Every halfback who ever laced up a boot was at Brisbane for a while there, around a certain age. And for some reason, he fell foul to that and ended up moving up to North Queensland. And I think when he first went up there, he didn't really set the world alight. But I think Todd Payton is a change agent and had a certain way of playing. It took a while to invest that into his players and just hit the ground running this year, doing very well. The Cowboys near the top, and he's integral to that. And also that ball he hit Al Holmes with last night. I mean, that was Joey, yes.
It was.
Almost in one ball there, he's done more in terms of something for a screen grab than Daly Cherry Evans has in a decade. Because Daly Cherry Evans isn't really that kind of person who pumps and whatnot. Well, he tried to a bit later and made a holic of it. But no, really good. Really impressed with him. Did his job really well. I said to you, I think, I can't remember if we were on camera or off camera the other day when we were doing QLS, that him and Ben Hunt are very similar. And I made a point of looking at it last night, and they are very similar. I was quite I felt quite on the money with that comment. So, yeah, Dearden would have gone. Well, I don't know if he did go to bed, but he would have gone to sleep at some point. A very content man. I believe he led the party stakes too, according to Newt Court today.
Well, I did see the Maroons bus at Caxton Street at about 4 a.m. I was there purely for research purposes for the podcast.
Yes.
And there was, I think, Mr. Carrigan was there, Dane Gagai was there. They were all the whole bus. They were so there was a bit of fun had by the Queens there, as they do.
Yeah. Well, that's what Origin in Queensland is all about, to be fair. So I'm fine with that.
Enjoy the spoils.
In terms of people joining our podcast, Taylor, I was talking to someone half an hour who was joining. And then 2 other people reached out to me directly. There's one down in Wollongong who's not joined, obviously. Yeah, I don't know why people just or whatever. But there's a gentleman called Kurt Collins in England who's really keen, and he sent me a note. So do you mind if I read it out? Because it ties right into what we're about to talk about, I think. His name's Kurt Collins. He's a Hull lad. I don't know if you've ever been over to the UK, mate, but Hull is Rugby League Central. There's a street in Hull named after one of their great players, which is very rare in England. So that just shows you how big Rugby League is in that town, in that city. He's been coaching both codes of football for 16 years, played at Hull FC's academy, Junior England and GB International, and played National Conference League for West Hull. I played against West Hull a couple of times, and I don't think I ever finished the game compass mentis. I was always knocked out or something, because it's just a real tough game of football and a tough place to play. Be interesting if there's a similar age to me, actually. Ex-RAF and now working with SEN children and difficult behaviour kids, working to get them back into mainstream education. He runs a company called Big Picture Coaching in the south of England, and he's also stuck his Instagram tag in there, Big Picture Coach 1. And then he started talking about Origin. He said, well, I'll tell you what he said and you tell me what you think to this. Ponga finally produces a performance at Origin.
Yes, I think Kalen Ponga always rises to the occasion in Origin level, and he plays better football at Origin level. But there were whispers after game 1 that he might have been a little bit shaky. He didn't have the best game 1. They won the game, but he didn't play that well at the start of this series. But last night he was tremendous last night.
I think for me with Ponga, I have a couple of. It's a shame Kirk's not here, because I'd love to have the back and forth with him in a very spirited and friendly way. But I think he's actually played quite a few good games at Origin level, Ponga. Overall, I think he's a bit of an overrated player, though. I think he's one of those players that when he's good, he's really good. So everyone just talks him up all the time. Last night he was really good. I can't fault him last night, but part of me thinks a player of his caliber should be doing that literally all the time. So I'm a bit reserved on Ponga, and I guess this ties in exactly what I was saying about Dearden before, how I'm not the kind of person who just praise over someone for the sake of it because everyone else is. I think he gets talked up too much, and I think he needs to own more games for Newcastle. And to me, he actually has played some of his best football at Origin. So that's my problem, if you like, with Kirk's comment there. I think he's had a couple of good performances.
What I will say about that comment, though, is he does play better in Origin football, but the level he played at last night is, as to what you said, you expect that off a man that's getting paid 1.3, probably the highest paid player.
To me, he should be playing like that 6 or 7 times out of 10.
Yeah, and that's probably what highlighted even more how good he was. So yeah, I think what Kirk said, I think he's pretty bang on the money in terms of an Origin type performance that we expect of him. That's now the benchmark.
Next point you raised was the rules and refereeing all change in Origin. Further fuels the fire while fans, coaches and players blow up constantly. The fight in the game, he's put the fight in inverted commas, by the way. The fight in the game would have been 2 reds and a yellow at NRL level. I can't disagree with that. Oh, here's Sergeant Slaughter. We have got somebody joining us, mate.
We do.
Tim, Sergeant Slaughter. How you doing, Tim?
Yeah, not bad, guys.
Well, hey, you're never late for the training sessions, so why are you late for the podcast?
Oh, I had to put some groceries away.
You good boy. Now, we are recording and we're in full stream. Have you ever met Taylor before?
No, I haven't actually.
G'day,
Taylor,
Tim. How are you, mate?
We call him
good, thank
Sergeant
you.
Slaughter. And we're just in the middle, Tim, of talking about Origin. So before I let Taylor answer the thought about the rules and refereeing, what did you think of Kalen Ponga's performance last night, Tim?
I really enjoyed it, actually. He brings a lot to the table. Just over like his meterage that he actually, I think going by the stats, he actually ran a little bit further than what James Tedesco did.
Kirk, who sent the questions in from England, said Ponga finally produces a performance at Origin level. Do you think that this was a rare kind of performance for Ponga, or do you think this is something he's come up with a fair few times before?
No, he comes up with it. It depends on whether there's structure around him, I find, because he's done it a couple of times this year for the Knights, where there's been some really good structure around him, and he can actually play his game. But when he's put into a position where he doesn't have that structure around him, he seems to go into his shell and plays more of a sort of a leadership role and helps direct guys around a lot more, where that just takes away from his natural game.
So just before I get Taylor to talk about the next point, can you just stick your video on, Tim? Because we've just got your picture of you in your rugbyleaguecoach.com.au shirt. There he is, look at him. Taylor, rules and referees all changing Origin, further fuels of fire. The fight would have been 2 reds and a yellow at NRL level. Fire away, Taylor.
I do believe that there is a change, certainly a change in attitude towards refereeing and decision making in the Origin arena, for sure. They approach the game differently. And although I am a Blues man, when I watched that, I thought that would have been again a sin bin for Suamalawi. He wasn't trying to stop the fight necessarily. He had Burton in a headlock. I would say he was more of provocative than he was trying to stop it, the blue. So yeah, I had that as another sin bin myself, which would have totally changed the complexion of the rest of, for the next 10 minutes and probably the rest of the game.
Tim, what do you sort of think about the change of tack, if you like, from referees in Origin?
It's good. It opens it up a lot. It's hard to with coaching like junior kids, like them seeing the difference between an NRL game and an Origin game. Like growing up, Origin was always harder, tougher, and they were a little bit more lenient on the rules. But nowadays, it's really hard to try and get the younger kids to understand that there is a difference, and the reason why there is a difference is I find that they are actually when it's open play, that's when these elite players just absolutely they flourish.
For me, I don't mind there being slightly different interpretations, boys. I just think if there's going to be bans, and I do think some of those Tino and the 2 fighters, Burton and Gegai, should have maybe had a little ban. But I don't think the Bulldogs, the Knights, and their club should have been affected. I think it needs to affect Origin 1 next year and maybe Origin 2. What say you, Taylor?
I think that it is tough because, some of those teams are still pushing to try and make the 8 and it could really affect their club level.
That's why I'm saying just if there's ban needed, don't put it on the clubs. It's nothing to do with the clubs. Put it onto Queensland and New South Wales next year.
It's hard though. It's hard because then it's, the NRL's trying to stamp out the punch. They're trying to stamp out the fighting. They've been trying to do it for years. That's the path they're on. If they start saying, well, you have to serve your bans in Origin, I think, or the punishments within Origin, I think they will be more likely to throw punches. So I don't think it's going to work in the NRL's best interests.
But what they've also done now is basically said to anybody in Origin, punch away, it's fine.
Why? They'll get bans, won't they?
No, they're cleared.
Right. So they just got 10 minutes in the bin.
Unless something else has happened since I saw Buzz Rothfield tweet when I woke up.
Yeah, I didn't think they'd been cleared. I thought they were sent the whole. I was of the opinion that the whole incident was sent on report.
It was, but I think the report got lost in the post. Kirk's last point. I turned into the host a bit here, Taylor, because I'm reading Kirk's things.
I know.
Are you getting upset? Queensland Law New South Wales into another arm wrestle I'm not a football game and come up trump. I'm going to answer that first. I disagree with Burke on that. I think Queensland actually played slightly better, and I refer to things like the higher completion rate and also the early kicking in the second half, and that's football.
It was very noticeable when they come out for that second half, the intentions that they had with their early kicking and turning the Blues around, and it was quite tactically minded. So again, I disagree as well. I do think though, when Queensland are at their best, they do play that grinding type football, and when New South Wales are at their best, they play a completely different. Which is why over the past 2 or 3 years, when New South Wales do put it together and they score points, it's 52-16. It's more of a blowout than it is the other way around. And I just think Queensland played their football, and they were tactically smart, and they were by far the better side last night. I
personally believe that the type of thing that the arm wrestle that he's talking about, he's actually a brand of football, and it's a smarter brand of football. I thought tactically last night, New South Wales got it really not wrong, but they were very average. The big takeaway I have from it was that they had to chance their arm a bit too much. So, for example, Daniel Tupou was a bit casual when he was throwing himself into the 40-20 effort. It was a bit casual. Also, was it Crichton who just threw a ball back into the in-goal or into the... Yeah, he did, didn't he? He threw a pass back, didn't he? I mean, that is just...
It was Stephen Crichton, yeah.
Yeah, like, just go down, take the tackle and play the ball. The other thing is that I thought the way the game was structured, whether it was Fittler's game plan or the way Cleary wanted to do it, I think it was so easy to see when they were shifting. I thought their shifts were so easy to read. And I think the biggest insult that Queensland could give to the attacking strategy of New South Wales is they were so confident that they kicked early and gave them the ball and back their defence. And Queensland had it all over them because they played most of the game down at the New South Wales end. And I thought Fittler used his backs a bit too much. Paolo, for example, was sensational at the start. Saifiti was sensational. He should have had them two on the field together at some point to really put a dent in the midfield of Queensland, bearing in mind that they were down to 15 for most of the game. And the other thing, I thought he kept Talakai out for too long. Unfortunately, personally, I don't believe Talakai is quite yet ready for Origin or an Origin level footballer. His errors last night were really costly, and that's where I think Fittler got it wrong there. What do you reckon, Tim?
Yeah, I believe so as well. With Talakai, like, he's a great player, but someone like Jack Whiten fits in so much better because he can play that hard middle role as well as filling in anywhere out in the back line, and he can play on both sides.
Regan Campbell-Gillard too would have been a better.
Yeah, exactly. From what I've been reading on socials and that, the reason Regan didn't get picked was because there's still a bit of a strife between him and the Panthers players.
Well, to me, if that is true, to me, they need to be, I won't say man enough, but they need to put New South Wales first.
Yeah, exactly.
And ignore that and just get on with the job. That some of the best teams that have ever played our sport and many others literally have had players that do not like each other. I mean, even the Rolling Stones, Keith and Nick didn't talk for 10 years or something, and they still did great concerts. So, you've got to put that behind you.
So, Lee, in terms of this result, this series, what do we see coming up for next year for both states? What can you see in the future based off these results?
I think
we'll start with Queensland.
I think Queensland, I'm going to get so much backlash from people in Queensland on this. Well, the Queensland development system is amazing, great. Like they've clearly got less players than New South Wales, which I suppose they always have, but less quality. I still think that New South Wales have the best 1 to 17 on each occasion. And I think when games are so close, it's very easy to jump to conclusions. Now, if New South Wales would have won that game last night, bear in mind, until Nathan Cleary tried that chip kick, it was a 4-point ball game. So say New South Wales had stealed that game last night. Do you know Brad Fittler would have been the joint most successful Origin coach next to Gus Gould?
Right.
Now, that's the fine margins we're dealing. Now, Queensland won game 1 and game 3 in a very tight manner. And I'm not taking anything away from them. But all I'll say is Queensland can't dine out on this victory. It doesn't mean Billy Slater is a master coach. He's done a great job. He's done a fantastic job. Even just looking at his body language during the game in the coaching box, he didn't seem like he was in control of the outcome in some way. Like he was sort of riding a moment like the Docky has been in the past, he was very emotional in there. Bit Craig Bellamy-esque, but at least, Craig Bellamy's put work in. I think what Billy has done has got everybody playing for the jumper, everybody playing for each other. I don't think Paul Green got that last year. I think so many Queensland players in game 1 and game 3 played above themselves. I think Billy and the staff got it wrong in the Perth game and flew there too late. I sort of feel that if New South Wales had Latrell Mitchell and Tommy Turbo, could have been looking at a 3-0 loss. And then who was missing for Queensland really over the series that you sort of thought could have made a big difference? Like, I know Munster missed game 3, but ultimately it's not like they're missing 2 players of the calibre of Tommy Turbo and Latrell. So
Queensland only sort of had Coates out.
Coates,
yeah.
And Coates is, I don't think you quite put Coates in the same level and the same bracket as Latrell.
Certainly not the same impact on the game.
No, damn good player, very good player. I think my mate's his agent actually, but yeah, just I don't think he's going to change the game like Latrell. Look, Latrell or Turbo. Look at the impact Turbo and Latrell have on their clubs.
Yeah.
So, I think the worst thing Queensland can do. Well done, Queensland. You're fantastic. The worst thing Queensland, the QRL, and everyone can do is rest on the laurels now and think that the development system is great, the playing structures are great, the coaching system, the coaching pathway, which is what we'll talk about a bit later, Taylor. There's still work to do because you need to keep producing these series wins.
Absolutely. Now, I had to think about this last night.
4 a.m.
Yeah, I had a lot of time to think about it actually last night.
Yeah.
Where the Blues got it wrong in this series, where their faults were. And I think a large part of that was at the selection table. I think for game 1, I think they had some personnel in there that possibly shouldn't have been. And for game 3, I would have liked to see Jack Whiten get back in that side. He's one of our most consistent for a long time. As you mentioned, Tim, he's a game breaker. He's very versatile, can play anywhere in the back 7, and he could play lock if needed to. He's just known for his defence.
You want somebody like that on your bench at least.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I would have also liked to have seen, and I'd like to hear both your opinion on this. I'll start with you, Tim. I think if when Latrell came back from America, I think if Freddie came out and publicly said, that's Latrell's spot, if Latrell is fit, Latrell plays, regardless. I think then Latrell plays Origin. He doesn't pull out and say, "Oh, it's the best for the team." I think then he plays, and I think he would have made a difference last night in our side. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Even if he wasn't as up to his fitness, just his presence on the field. His first 2 games back for Souths, he's nowhere near his top match fitness, but just his presence around the ball and around that team would have, I honestly believe that New South Wales would have cleaned us up 3-0 because I'm a proud Queenslander, but having like Latrell there, just his presence on the field, he's got that little bit of niggle that he can get underneath Dane Gagai, Val Holmes. He can do that, and he doesn't have to take a lot of that pressure of if I don't make a play, then we're going to lose. He's just a natural sporting. His natural sporting ability is just phenomenal. But more importantly, his presence amongst that team. That's one thing that I've really noticed over the last couple of years is when New South Wales seem to be starting to dominate a game and that sort of stuff, they play as a team. Where when things start falling apart for them, they fall back to, we'll just keep passing it to Cleary and he or Tedesco and just pass it to these players that they're brilliant, but they work better as a team than being individuals. And for me, that's what Latrell brings. He brings that team together. Just a bit of glue and that sort of stuff. Like, as I said, like, he won't be at peak performance for probably another two weeks or so. But what he actually brings to the table is his leadership and him being able to get the best out of the guys around him.
Yeah, I agree, Tim. I agree. What do you think, Lee?
I agree with what you say about Whiten being in the squad, and I think he covered so many bases. Well, this is only with the benefit of hindsight, right? I think they should have let him play for South twice, have him in the squad, and then if he pulled up okay, maybe bring him in. Like a bit, a bit like Alfie, just sneaking Alfie in 2001. Just something like that, just to, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, really. Because they lost, didn't they? So they have to do something a bit different. Because what struck me as well is that without Turbo and Latrell, they didn't seem to have that much game-breaking prowess. Blue Eye, for me, is a bit of an average series.
Yeah, I thought Jerome Luai didn't have his best series either. Obviously...
Teddy tried... Sorry, mate. I didn't mean to talk.
No, you're right. Obviously, the Panthers connection helps there. I think if he didn't have that Penrith combination with Cleary going into these games, I think he probably would have been one that would have come under fire, that possibly could have been looking at getting chopped this series, in my opinion.
And I think Teddy tries constantly. He's always trying to do something. He probably ends up doing too much of the wrong thing sometimes because he's looking for something. And I think I allude to what I mentioned earlier about New South Wales going wide on the wrong play of the balls. Well, what I'm talking about is that in a set of six, if you go 3 in or 4 in and then shift, the defence can read you quite easily. It's something I used to talk to you about, Taylor, back in the day, 10, 12 years ago, and Tim heard me say that too. You want to get Teddy, I think, 2 or 3 passes out, coming on the back of something, and either making the right decision to give it to the centres or the wings or going himself. Instead, he seems to be spending an awful lot of time in the middle of the park taking up hit-ups. And I'm sorry, if you're using your best player in the world as a surrogate prop, then we've got to look at the tactics. But we've probably dissected Origin quite well there, boys.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Do you have anything else before we move on, Lee or Tim, about the game last night that you think is worth note?
Just that it's alive and well, mate. I mean, there's been times on this New South Wales era in the last 5 years that you thought that Queensland Rugby League was dying, particularly last year. Yep. Particularly 2 years ago when Paul Gower said this is the worst Queensland side he's ever seen. But it is alive and well, and the concept's alive and well. And well done, Queensland. And well done, New South Wales. I mean, everyone keeps saying it was a great game. Well, guess what? It takes 2 teams to make a great game. And take away the intercept try from Ben Hunt, there was a 4-point ball game. If New South Wales score in that, we're all saying how great New South Wales is, how great Freddie is. I thought both teams, played their part in one of the most memorable Origin games you'll see.
Yep, totally agree. I was saying to my wife, she follows New South Wales, and neither of us would have cared who won the game because it was such a brilliant game.
Takes 2 teams or 2 tennis players to make a great game. So, in that sense, there's no loser. Yeah.
As they say, rugby league was the real winner.
Correct. Just like people who listen to this podcast.
Just a bunch of winners. So let's move on to some more NRL news. It's come out today that Benji Marshall is about to sign a 5-year deal with the West Tigers under Tim Sheens originally as an assistant and then pushing to be the long-term coach over there at Concord. This is huge considering, there's Kim Serralda, all these great young coaches out there that we all kind of thought would probably make their way there or to Belmore. They've chosen to blood one of their own. I'm particularly interested to hear your take on this, Lee, because I know you're very, very boisterous about your opinion when it comes to these coaches, the players that come in. And so as soon as I read this news, I thought, well, I guess I know what I'm going to talk to Lee about tonight. So, mate, talk me through it.
If Benji was given the head coaching job now, I'd have a problem. For the first time in what to me is living memory, West Tigers are actually trying to plan a bit longer than 2 years. My worry about Tim Sheens being that man, I have met Tim Sheens a couple of times and he's great. Well, talk to his ex St. Greg, so we same bloodline as me, you, and me and you, Taylor, and in that sense. And he's a great man, an absolute fantastic coach of the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and he won a World Cup with Australia in 2013. And I think he made the finals with the Tigers in either 2011 or 2012. I think it was 2011. They finished fourth. Basically, for the last decade, it's been a real mixed bag with Tim Sheens, or a very, probably not even mixed, quite a negative bag. And I made a post earlier this week that age isn't an issue until it becomes an issue. Age is irrelevant until it's relevant. And I guess people age and grow differently. And, I worry that Tim Sheens' day as a coach is gone. And you only say that about people who've been around the game too long or a bit long in the tooth. So if this announcement was Tim Sheens with John Morris as head coach, Benji Marshall as assistant, and then Benji to take over in 2 years, and I probably would have been like, yeah, great plan. The fact that Tim Sheens has got the reins for the next 2 years, I would still be a little bit worried if I'm a Tigers fan. That said, Tim and Benji obviously get on great. Tim's got a lot to offer. I guess they've rescued what could have been a real tricky situation for me. They've gone some way to rescue it, because the criticism I have of a lot of the coaching appointments is they don't get some kind of apprenticeship first. Billy Slater's first 3 games as a head coach were Origin 1, Origin 2 and Origin 3. Now, yes, they've won the series. That doesn't automatically mean he can coach. Like, it's a lot more complicated than that. And a season of NRL with a full pre-season and all the things that you have to deal with is a lot more complicated than that. And I always say that a coach should have a good apprenticeship. At least Benji's having a couple of years, in theory, an apprenticeship.
So you brought up the age thing.
Yeah.
Tim Sheens, I just did some quick doodling. Tim Sheens, 71 years old.
Yeah.
Wayne Bennett, 72.
Yeah. I mean, at least Wayne Bennett in the last decade has still produced some wins. I mean, people criticise Wayne Bennett for his time at Newcastle. They got, I think it was 2012 or 2013, they got the closest they've been to a grand final in the last 20 years.
It doesn't surprise me. They haven't had a very successful 20 years.
One game off the grand final. When he went back to Brisbane, they were one field goal away from a grand final win from a premiership. What have they done since he left? He coached the
2020 Origin side.
2020 Origin
the worst side. Origin team in history.
Worst Origin team. I mean, he's still showing that he can come up with the goods. That's just the way it is. Alex Ferguson was a manager at Manchester United until about the age of 72, 73. People just age differently. Des Hasler's 60-something. Doesn't look it. Doesn't act it. It's just the way it is. And I think sometimes people age differently. It's just the way it is. And I think the comment about age is more about the performance over the last 10 years pertaining to Tim Sheens. Like, he coached a lot of second division in England and it didn't end well.
How was he over in England with regards to his mentoring and that of the younger players? Because I know, like, Benji's his last 3 teams, like Brisbane, he went back to West Tigers and then over to Souths. He's been a mentor for a lot of the really younger kids coming through.
Yeah.
And from what it looks like, he's really, really excelled at that. Maybe
Tim Sheens was coach at Salford for a bit, which is my hometown. And I can't sit here and say that it went down superbly.
Yep.
He was also coach or something or other at Widnes and then at Hull KR. And all I'll say is, since Tim left Hull KR, Tony Smith took over Hull KR and gave him the best season in many a year. And I can't, at the top of my head, think how Widnes have performed. But his time in England wasn't what you'd expect of Tim Sheens. When he was coach of Australia in 2013, I saw that firsthand when I was with the USA, and they were quite methodical. It's one thing having the best players in the world, but it's another getting them to play as a team and the processes you have around them. And nobody got near them in that World Cup. And I praised Tim Sheens for that. When I think about it, that could have been an autumn swan for him as a coach, and then just sort of go into a mentoring role. There's a massive difference when your name is on the bottom of the team sheet as opposed to not. So when you're named at the bottom of the team sheet, everything literally comes back to you. Everything that happens within an organisation, football-wise, is on your shoulders. Depending on the structure of the club, obviously, but the team's performance is on your shoulders. If he has that bit of a distance away, he can still have a massive impact. Somebody else's name on the team sheet, and I think that's the big difference. I just think my gut instinct just tells me there might be a problem leading into the Benji tenure starting. 2 years is a bit of a long time.
You know what? I'm going against you. I don't think 2 years is a long time.
What about if you're a West Tigers fan who's not seen your team in the finals for over a decade?
I get that, and it's super frustrating. I just think that if you're a tradie, you're a business owner, right? And you go and you put a 16-year-old apprentice on. Now, in the back of your mind, you could be saying, even to your friends or to your wife who does the books or your business partners, look, I think this kid's a goer. He'll he might take over the business. He finishes apprenticeship. He'll take over the business when I want to retire, or he's going to be the foreman or the leading hand, or do you know what I mean? You have that. Rarely do you walk up and sign a contract to hand him over the keys before he's finished his apprenticeship.
Agreed.
And he's really only done some development stuff for the Tigers, from what I've read and what I've seen. Benji?
Yeah, well, I'm saying that if he was... So have you seen the way Gus sort of runs the club? If you're a head coach under Gus, do you think you're the head coach, or do you think
under Gus?
Yeah, or do you think Gus is the head coach and you're the person who runs the training drills, picks the team, and
if Gus,
who do you think runs the football joint?
If I'm the head coach under Gus, I wouldn't even take the cardboard box away from my desk.
And that's what I think might have been a better fit, in the sense that, I'm not talking about Benji being the choice. I'm talking about somebody else, like a John Morris. John Morris played for the club for a while, so he might have been a good fit. Sean Wayne in England is a very successful coach. James Flanagan's name keeps getting knocked around. Christian Wolf. But look, I think this is a better outcome for the Tigers than if Benji got just handed the keys.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or Tim Sheens just was the coach and that was it. Like, I think it's a better outcome for the Tigers. I think I prefer 1 year, though. And then, you just got to... No, I don't know.
I think
what do you think, Tim? Yeah, let's go to you.
My wife's a mad West Tigers fan, and so's her family. So, like, for me, I think it'll be good for Benji to have that 2 years under Sheensy, but more importantly, it gives some clarity to some of the players on whether they're going to stick around or not, because a lot of the players had clauses in their contracts to get out when Maguire left. I think it's got to do with, like, they're showing that, rightio, okay, we've got this coach and assistant coach for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Tim Sheens will stay on after that 2 years as head coach as sort of mentoring Benji and that. You'll also have Robbie Farah there as well.
Apparently, Robbie can't do too much because of his business interests or something.
Okay. But he's around the club. So what's to say down the track you don't have, like the Walker brothers, have Benji and Farah running the show?
Well, there's another couple of people who haven't had a look in. The other thing is Brett Kamal has got the job at the minute. I definitely think he's done something of an apprenticeship. He's been around the game in the last few years, back room.
He's been doing a lot with the women's game, with women's rugby league. The Tigers they're looking at going into play grand final for the women down there.
Okay. I wonder how he feels, how Noddy feels about everything.
Well, I think from what I read, it'll be Benji, Noddy, and all three of them.
Okay.
All working underneath Tim Sheens sort of thing. So he's got like 3 assistant coaches so that he can. The club's got some depth behind it for a change because like they had depth, really good depth, and then they let all of their top players go.
At least they've got a 5-year direction.
That's right. You've got a plan in place. There's a succession. There's an idea. I don't like the idea that it's been pen put to paper sort of thing. That that is what it is. I would have liked to see them have the 3 different coaches, whether it be Robbie Farah and all that, and watch them develop and just see which one's going to be best for what role. But this is the way they've decided to go. It does give stability to players in terms of signing long-term contracts as well. They know who's going to be their coach in 3 years' time. They know who's going to be their coach in 4 years' time. I
was just going to say what it does say. I mean, if you're a coach now, I remember, mate, being a young coach and thinking I wanted to climb the coaching ladder. Like I know a couple of assistant coaches who might not be that well known to several people, but I'll give one example. A guy called Craig Sandercock. He was above me at Manly. When we were at Manly, he was the reserve grade coach, right? So he was the one behind Des. When reserve grade got scrapped, he got put down to under 18 XG ball.
Jeez.
I was under 16s, he got put down to 18. Now, he just sort of caught back and moved on with it. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he just stayed in the game. Eventually ended up being the Hulk AR head coach, didn't go great. He's ended up being an assistant coach. One of those assistant coaches that seems to move around anyway. A bit like Dave Ferner or Steve Georgalis or I'm trying to think of others. What's his name? The fella who takes over as interim, but a lot like Josh Hannay. Craig's a bit like that. He's popped up a few different clubs. But my point, if I'm Craig Sandercock and I'm plugging away like that, for somebody like Benji, just to get that opportunity, I mean, what a great chance for Benji, right? And also the other fact that there's a bloke who's not done that great as a coach for the last decade who's got the coaching job. And he talks about the ages. I mean, like, Tim Sheens and Wayne Bennett. Wayne Bennett coached across I think it's the 6th decade he's coaching it. So I think it's a real sad indictment of the coaching pathway that we're still at this point. There's not a massive list of coaches knocking on the door, or if they are, they're just literally not getting looked at. Criteria isn't there for them to, the clubs aren't going right. All right, there's this fella. He's coached for 25 years. At every level of the game. Maybe he knows a bit about coaching. He won some trophy. That doesn't come into their heads. It's all right, how many games did you play? And I'm a big believer that you don't have to have been a horse to be a good jockey. And I think what this comes down to is what is a coach and what role of a coach is. I think we'll leave that for another podcast. What do you reckon? Yes,
let's leave it for that. Tim, anything more to comment on this Tigers situation before we move on?
No, mate. No, I think it might be a good thing for the Tigers. I really do. Just having that consistency there, and hopefully the admin and that sort of start to just really concentrate on keeping their mouths closed and not letting everything leak out.
The place leaks like a sieve. It should be called West Sieves.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they do. And, I'm a big believer that clubs like the Bulldogs, Tigers, to an extent, the Titans, Dragons, Warriors, that have had lots of different coaches walk in and walk out and had not very successful seasons. I'd like to know who in the management behind doors is also getting moved on, because if they keep moving on coaches, they keep moving on players, and results are still the same. It's you got to start to ask questions. What's been the constant variable here? Anyway, let's move on, because that's another podcast in and of itself. I think that's
definitely
that one. I think we could go on for a while about that. But there is one more thing I'd like to bring up, mate. I love a bit of social media. I love a scroll, and this week I went for a scroll, and it seemed like every single time I was on the toilet having a look, or doing what I need to do,
looking out on the toilet.
There was I was looking at rugby league coach.
Good lad.
Sorry,
Good lad. Yeah.
And it's you can't see it. The post here, it's a screenshot of the well-known rugby league player turned manager Clinton Tchaikovsky, and your post around that, with obviously the young Jai Gray, outstanding young 5'8", played for the South Logan Magpies in the Melbourne Inga competition this year, and then the Queensland Schoolboys. I didn't get a chance to watch the final, but apparently dominated the final, dominated the competition, and then missed out on selection in the Australian Schoolboys.
Yeah.
And for a manager like Clinton Tchaikovsky to post what he posted around it was massive, and it sparked a huge debate amongst your fan following base league. 253 likes, 9 shares, and 120 comments.
That's nothing. Have a scroll and look at the Ben Aiken one and the Billy Slayton one.
120 comments, mate. With people. There's something going wrong here with our trials and our trial selections. Yep. There's something going wrong if players like this are being denied and turned away. What can we do to fix it?
If you notice on the post, I stopped short of commenting on the boys tournament last week. It wasn't there, right? And the other thing to mention is that there is somebody who truly deserves to be in there instead of Jai Gray. I'm not taking anything away from the 17. Right? Will say though that I have been around the schoolboy game for a long time, well over a decade, every other trial I've seen, the vast majority of them, they go down the path of least resistance. So there is a full list before a game of players that they are looking at. Now, you'll find the main criticisms from parents and players is that the side is already picked. Well, one of the ways that happens is that people have to look and go, this is who, this is who's coming to trial. So he's played Melbourne Inga or he's played SG Ball. Let's get him in. It all comes back to the criteria of the trial, right? So if everything is transparent for the public that want to have a look, then yes, you can be upset with the decision, but ultimately you have to respect the decision because everyone's transparent and everyone's open. I think Clinton I don't know Clinton, but I think part of his anger in this post was that he sort of expected it because he's seen it loads before. And I think that's the problem rather than whether Jai Gray got picked or not. So think about under 18s Australian schoolboys side, right? Can you imagine some of the stakeholders that are trying to influence that side? So, for example, a player agent will really want their player to get into the team because they'll have a clause in their contract for that player that they make schoolboys to get an extra 5K or 10K.
Yes.
Or it makes their price higher when they go to bargain with a club.
Correct.
Right? So it stands to reason then, if a club's short of a few quid or doesn't want to spend a few quid, that they may pressure the other way too.
Yes.
Right? So there's some idea of politics there. Then there's the old thing of Queensland, New South Wales. There's the old thing of which schools people are from. And I'm not saying it happened last week. I'm talking about everything pre-2022, right? The reason I'm so vociferous in my comments about trials, I saw and witnessed and was part of firsthand what I consider to be the best and most thorough trial experience I've ever had. And that was under David Way in the world-class high-performance plan that Sport England put on with Rugby League in the years 1999 to about 2006 when I was involved. Under David Way, we used to have, let's say I was the North of England coach, right? For argument's sake. I would have been the head of the meeting, the chair of the meeting, and all the other coaches and the other stakeholders would have been in that meeting too. And we had to go, right, who do we think should be number one? And Taylor, you might go, I think it should be Tim Cheeseman. And I'd have to ask why. And then if you answered, well, it's because he's a good kid, he ran hard, we were instructed to sort of go, no, we need more evidence. Why should Tim Cheeseman be in that side? And basically, you had to justify why that person was in, i.e. good right-handed carry, good step off the right foot, good involvement, did so many hit-ups. We had to study the game in so much depth to get an answer, not just, oh, he's a good kid, let's get him in, or he played well last year, let's get him in, And you also had to have agreement amongst the group. Now, one thing I have seen ad nauseum in the junior game in Australia is with these kind of things, quite often it's the pathway of least resistance. It's, right, boys, we've got drinks at 3, so come on, let's get this side picked. That is no way to dictate the future of any kid's life. And
it is the future. It is 100% the future.
Huge. I can tell you so many players, I can name so many players that have been cut off well before the Australian schoolboy level. Well before. I'm going to read out to you a post that I repeated from last April. And I didn't even say who it was last year. I just said it was on the Eastern Seaboard, Australia. Now where I'm going to go is I'm going to say it was in the school game because it becomes even more relevant. While I'm just scrolling towards it, Taylor, do you mind just filling the time up with something?
Yeah. So with these trials, you mentioned before how important it is for their futures, and you have all these different forces. The forces of the NRL clubs is somewhat bigger, I believe, than the force of the actual team that gets named itself.
Yeah.
All the scouts are at these games, every single one. And what we're seeing is with the 20s, the national 20s competition now not being of existence, I believe clubs are handing bigger contracts to kids at a younger age if they see them. 5 years ago, they used to say, yeah, we'll give him a 20s contract. If he's good, give him a 20s contract, see how he goes in the 20s for the next 2 years, and we'll go from there. Now, there's so many schoolboys that they go, right, well, he's good, we want to lock him up. Well, next year we'll have him training full-time. And they're going straight into these things instead of because there's no club 20s anymore where they would send them through to see how they go. So it's even more so a bigger week or couple of days or getting selected in these sides because it can massively change their future. But sorry, go on, Lee. You probably found what you need by now.
Yeah, I found it. Well, first of all, I just want to say that in the year 2021, 2022, we've got that much video technology available to us now. The first thing coaches should do when they finish at 3 o'clock is go home and watch all the games again, because the naked eye can't always be trusted.
Correct.
And the other thing is that the tournament, if it goes 7 days, then what happens on the 7th day is just as important as what happens on the first day. And apparently Jai Gray was man of the match in the final, or very close to. But anyway, that's this is just conjecture from people who weren't there, so that's probably not fair on anybody, really. The trial I was talking about a year ago, and I reshared it this week, and I came to share it because I'd heard so much, and I've seen so many kids just so downtrodden by these things that I thought, finally, I've got a platform where I'm going to start chipping away at this. A trial where there were close to 100 players, but it lasted for about an hour. There was one field and the selectors had to find between 35 and 40 players. Field in use wasn't a full-tide field, it was a tuck field. Most players were played out of position. Some players only received 3 to 5 minutes of playing time. Selectors were refereeing the game, so they weren't sat on the side watching. They were refereeing the games. There was a lot of players who were selected without even playing. Substitutions involve players being encouraged to choose which player they replaced on the field and making changes.
Jeez.
Now, that's something I do in my training runs. I dare say, just go and tap somebody on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Not in a trial that influences a kid's future. The information was verified by several people, and I referred to it then, and I triple down on it now. It's either gross negligence or gross incompetence, and there was nepotism and politics galore involved. That trial is in one of the strongest areas for rugby league in the world, involving under 18s in the schoolboy game. And that was before they even got the chance to trial for their state. So in other words, it's at the metro level.
Wow. And under 18s?
Under 18s. So, and I am telling you that there were people in that trial and in other trials that represented New Zealand at rugby league. It wasn't known. They didn't want it known, and they didn't even get past that first trial anyway. So regardless of what the issue, because that's happened loads of times, but regardless, I know players who have done that. I remember a player, fighter toa.
I know.
You know, don't you?
I played with Mr. Faitoto.
And I got him over, and I found him and watched him playing for New Zealand under 18s, and they were the first New Zealand team to beat Australian schoolboys in New Zealand. And he was a year young and played. He didn't get past that stage.
Wow.
And they didn't know, that he was Kiwi or from Nala,
Yeah.
So I guess in an area where there's a lot of people and a lot of talent, if there's 3 times the people, you need to do 3 times the work of other areas. In fact, you can't have an hour's trial not to get it right.
Absolutely. And if you're experiencing these issues for the Australian schoolboy team, well, what it seems to be these issues, that's the highest level. It could only be worse underneath that. If that's the peak, and that's how they pick, how the peak side's getting picked, all those sorts of things. It could only, like that under 18 trial you mentioned. Can you imagine the under 15 trial?
Oh,
could you imagine the year 6 trials at a which they do, the primary school trials as well. They go all the way through. They can represent the state. Imagine the state of the trials if they were running those. Just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Now, Tim, I don't know much of your background, mate. I don't know whether you've had much to do with schoolboy football. But
any level of football trial-wise, I suppose it could talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Or any sort of trials. But that's just disgusting stories like that, isn't it? I know.
Yeah. No, that is absolutely disgusting. I've been coaching like the under 10s, under 11s, under 12s, and this year under 13s, and just seeing the disappointment on the kids' faces, and like going and watching a few of the trials and that, it is really, really hard because like kids that have the ability and that sort of stuff.
Oh no, we've lost him.
He was on a mission then too.
He was just about to unload.
Well, his point was right. Like, kids are at the heart of this.
100% kids are at the heart. And this is not just going to affect their rugby league careers.
Yeah.
This could affect their life. This could be a kid in under 12s or 13s, doesn't get a real go, doesn't get an opportunity to showcase their wares, don't get picked in the side. They say, well, not only did I not get picked, I didn't even have the opportunity. And they go, oh, to hell with this football stuff. And then they're not playing team sport anymore. And it can really snowball for them. The
politics of it, Taylor, back in 2014, 5 stone by stone. he wasn't the only player that was picked, not picked. And the players came into training the day after with me, and they were genuinely in shock.
Yeah.
Because another school that was not as good got a lot more players, and it just so happened that their coach was also
the coach.
And luckily for them, 3 weeks later, we played them in a fixture. And we beat them something like 56.
Yeah.
It was annihilation. And there were about 9 rep players in their team, about in mine, according to that rep system. Now, that's not normal.
No.
No. And that's in the last decade. So, yeah, it's a genuine issue. It's a genuine issue. And I guess if we can't trust our school teachers to have some integrity, then we've got a real issue. And I must stress again, I am not talking about last week. I just used Clinton Scott's post as a way of generating conversation about that.
So, yeah, absolutely. There is a real problem, and this is not going to be fixed anytime soon. At schoolboy level, 90% of the people picking the sides are just teachers.
Yeah.
They're not.
Unless you have the system in place that proves integrity and honesty. So, for example, right, say you've got a 7-day competition and 5 selectors, and all of you agree that Tim should be number 1, Taylor should be number 2, and Lee should be number 3. If all 5 of you agree every day, all 7 days, then guess what? You probably should put that person in, right?
Yes.
If I'm in one day, not the next, blah, 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 that's how it should be. It should be so transparent that when you are pulled up, why did that person not make it? Just say, well, on game 2, he didn't do as much as... that's what you need. And I know it can happen because I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen where the complaints were minimised because of the process that was gone through. People might dislike you for it, but they can't not respect you for the decision you've made then. They can't not respect your decision.
Yes.
You've gone through great lengths. If you've just, and that's the problem. It's the lack of transparency about it, I suppose, or the process. They should have the selection process in the program. To select players, here's what happened.
Yeah, this is how we judge it. These are the I guess the KPIs that we look at. What we're aiming at, what we're targeting here, and what we're looking for, and you should be able to know. And
again, I'll just say it again, just so nobody jumped on me. I am not talking about last week's tournament when I talk about it.
And to be fair, I do not know enough about. I've watched Jai Gray play several times, and he absolutely is someone that I would say would be more than equipped to play in an Australian schoolboys jersey.
Probably not great form from the manager either, publicly putting it out like that.
No, I don't believe so.
And also, he's drawn a bit of a wedge there between the Australian schools and him as a manager. Like, that's probably not the right way to do it, I don't think.
I think managers should be seen and not heard for 99% of
some of the podcasts.
Yeah, and look, I've met Clinton Tchaikovsky. Was actually him and Steve Gillis were my managers when I played. Chimesy was my manager, so I signed on to Gillis and Tchaikovsky Sports Management, and I had good experiences with both those men. And to be honest, Steve Gillis, Chimesy's, the reason why I signed with him as my manager at the time was because he was honest and he seemed to have the best interest for me at heart. As a 17-year-old, he said, mate, you don't need a manager. If you've got a contract in front of you, sign it, which was the right advice. And then he said, mate, if you're looking, 3 years' time when that contract's up, you need a bit of help, let me know and I'll keep an eye on you. If things start progressing, I'll let you know. So they're definitely good people from my experiences with them. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that would have been the best way to go about it. I don't know what his target was there. Sometimes
tell you what, mate, because it's sort of like a natural fit. Next week when we do the players,
the cheese is back.
Sorry guys, my phone just died.
Just in time for the end. We're about to die. I'm just saying to Taylor that for the players podcast next week, let's do a segment on player agents, because I know parents ask me about them all the time. So.
And they're such a big part of the game. Their influence goes far and wide, and that's something that we need to delve in. So we'll pencil that in for next week. Lee, we'll have a chat about player agents and managers, their roles on the game and the effects they can have on these kids. Tim, you're about to go on a rant before. Sorry that you got cut off, but give us some cliff notes, mate. Where are we going?
Just that there's not enough time. Like, they've only got a short period of time to select these teams, and they're not. These coaches aren't reaching out to like their club coaches or their school coaches to see on how these kids train and how they play. They're just sort of seeing like a snippet, a very, very small snippet of what these kids are actually capable of doing. And it makes it hard. I've known 2 kids that have walked away from even going to any sort of districts or anything like that. They just turn around and say, well, it's rigged. The team's picked before I even go there. So what's the point?
I think you missed it, Tim, while you were charging your phone up or buying a new one or whatever you did. That's the problem. It's if there's no transparency about what you're doing, no KPIs or whatever, you can always leave yourselves open to the accusation that you're a bit you're not honest. It's a bit like finances. If you don't have a docket that says you bought something, you can always be accused of stealing. So it's probably a good place to wrap it up, Taylor. Eh?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I will start our wrap up by thanking Tim, our first official drop-in guest to the show, mate. Loved it. Loved having you on.
I love being on, mate. Greatly appreciated.
Turn up on time next time. And
I will, mate.
Phone up next time.
Yeah. I'll have it connected up all the way next time.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Mate, did your coaching go this week, Tim?
Yeah, really good. The kids really enjoyed the new way of doing the session. So, and they actually started picking things up a lot quicker.
Nice.
So I was super impressed with them.
Good.
A few rugby league coach tips.
Correct. I was away with Tim the other week in Melbourne.
Yes.
Yeah, so we went on a bit of a coaching intensive, didn't we, lad?
Oh, yes. Well and truly. It was really good.
I mean, I'll let Tim tell you a bit more if you want. But basically, let him run with some stuff and then gave him feedback on it. And,
it was
lovely.
Some of the best sort of coaching experience that I've had, and be just showing some of the finer points of it and how to plan my sessions a lot better and that sort of stuff, because I've basically been going along, this is the way that I was coached and everything like that, and tried putting that into my sessions and then picking up things off different coaches and trying to chuck that in. And it was...
Which is a very normal journey.
Too much information for the kids. I had to slow it down and break it down and just try and concentrate on like just a couple of elements instead of trying to fit like 15, 20 things in the one session. And it was really, really good. And all of the kids tonight, they had an absolute ball. So
that's amazing. You want kids to enjoy training.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the end game, of course. If they're enjoying it and they're staying in rugby league, that's what we all want.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you, Tim. Thank you for dropping in, mate. We'll see you next week. Lee, what's the plan for rugby league coach for the next week? You got a bit on?
Currently, I'm doing a free 4-week plan for anybody who sends me the email address, but bit time limited. But if they did listen to this podcast, and I'll still honour it. So a 4-week coaching plan or a 4-week free plan for players, free of charge. All I need is your email address. The other thing before we go, I've had a couple of people comment, mate, to me. You asked for some feedback on sleeping in the Au Natural a few weeks ago, and then you never followed it up.
Well, mate,
you never followed it up. No
time like the present. Did you give it a go?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
it was too cold in Melbourne.
It was too cold in Melbourne, yeah. I was with Tim in Melbourne the week later after when I spoke to you when we did the podcast, mate. So
doesn't help.
I wasn't going to do it there as well. Because, the sort of apartment we had. It wasn't as private as you'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I used to find that that's just dominant. If you're walking around in the nud, it's your territory. It's the alpha male move. It's the alpha male move.
If you want to know why Taylor Brown isn't playing at Redcliffe anymore, look no further.
They kick me out. Take
care, boys.
All right, lads. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
No worries. Take it easy, guys. Thank you.